Welcome to this edition of the Head to Head Podcast. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 181 of the podcast. And in this episode of the podcast, I'm talking about the thing that the entire NFL has been talking about all week long, Odell Beckham Jr. And it's because all week we've been patiently waiting to see which team Odell would pick, and we wanted it so badly to be our team because we still think of Odell as a premier wide receiver, a future Hall of Famer, and one of the very best in the league, up there with Julio Jones, Devontae Adams, and DeAndre Hopkins. And now that Odell Beckham Jr. has picked the LA Rams, I'm sure there are a lot of disappointed fans that are upset that he didn't pick your team because, like I said, you still view him as one of the very best, and I have the stats to back up the fact that he is not one of the very best. Odell Beckham Jr., per his career, has 51 career touchdowns, a pretty impressive number, but 35 of which occurred during his first 3 seasons with the New York Giants, 12 in 2014, 13 in 2015, and 10 in 2016, since his best was 6 in 2018, his last season with the Giants. In his 2.5 seasons with the Browns, he has scored 7 total touchdowns. He is living off of his name and not what he's actually doing in the NFL. It's not like when he is playing, he's putting up bonkers numbers. Again, he hasn't scored double-digit touchdowns since 2016. That is 5 years ago now. And listen, I understand why people are still infatuated with him. He was a freakish athlete, and a lot of people predicted he would become the greatest receiver in NFL history. But this is football, and more players peak than sustain greatness for a long period of time. I mean, right now, people, when it was talked about that Odell could possibly end up with the Patriots, people were comparing him to Randy Moss, right? Because Randy Moss had a rough period with the Oakland Raiders and then famously was traded to the Patriots and resurrected his career with his best season yet, 22 touchdowns, and he was a legitimate MVP candidate. And I have some serious issues with that comparison. I mean, for starters, in his first year with Oakland, Randy Moss was not bad. I mean, it has been over-exaggerated how bad Randy Moss was with the Oakland Raiders. In his first year, he had 1,000 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. I mean, that's better production than Odell Beckham Jr. ever had with the Cleveland Browns. It was Moss's second year with the Raiders that was super pedestrian. I mean, he only had 3 touchdowns and under 500 receiving yards. But think about this. Moss had 1 season of not being elite. Odell has had a few seasons of not being a top-tier wide receiver. Again, he has not scored double-digit touchdowns since 2016. Another main difference is Moss had already had a long run of being one of the very best receivers ever. Odell has only had a small window of being the very best. By age 29, which is the age of Odell right now, Moss had already had over 100 career touchdowns and 6 seasons of over 10 touchdowns. Odell has had 3 total seasons, all happening in his first 3 seasons, and Moss had 6 years of over 1,200 receiving yards by that age, while Odell has had 3 total, all of which happened in his first 3 seasons. My point is, Odell is no Randy Moss, and we shouldn't compare him to those type of players. We should not be comparing Odell Beckham Jr. to Hall of Fame level talents. He's not Jerry Rice, he's not Terrell Owens, and he's not Randy Moss. In fact, the type of players you should be comparing Odell Beckham Jr. to is the players that had a small peak run of being dominant. One example is Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell was one of the best running backs we've ever seen with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was a monster. He could catch the ball better than any running back in the league. And then he left the Jets, and we all thought he would sustain that success, and he didn't. And he became largely irrelevant. Listen, he's not the same guy when he wasn't a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And another example is Jimmy Graham. Remember Jimmy Graham with the Saints? He was one of the best tight ends we've ever seen. He was a touchdown monster. And then he went to the Seahawks, and he's been with the Packers, and he's been with the Bears. He has not been the same Jimmy Graham. And that has been the same fate for Odell Beckham Jr. We still think of Odell as that guy with the Giants when he was just with the Cleveland Browns, and he did largely nothing. Again, 7 touchdowns in 2.5 seasons with the Cleveland Browns. He had 35 touchdowns in his first 3 seasons. He has gotten worse, not better. He is not that same guy, and you should not be getting all that excited about him joining your team. I think it is a relief that he has not joined some of those teams. Those 3 players I mentioned, Odell along with Graham and Bell, are not all-time great players, but for a time period, a very small one, a very peak window, they were the best at their positions. But you would not compare Le'Veon Bell to LaDainian Tomlinson. You would not compare Jimmy Graham to Tony Gonzalez. So you should not compare Odell Beckham Jr. to Randy Moss. He has not had a long sustained run of being one of the very best wide receivers in NFL history. Yes, for a time period, Odell was a freak, a monster. We all thought he was destined for greatness. But then things change, and it feels like we need to admit that to ourselves. We just can't admit that Odell is not the same Odell when he was with the Giants. He has not been the same guy, and to think that he's going to revert back to that guy, I think is pure insanity. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I am a fan of the Patriots, so I want to talk about that aspect of this. I mean, Patriots fans seemingly really wanted Odell Beckham Jr., like I said, because of the comparisons to Randy Moss, which, like I stated, are pure ridiculousness. But I want to talk about why they want Odell Beckham Jr., because to me, it doesn't make sense. You poured in all this money, you brought in Nelson Aguilar, you brought in Kendrick Bourne, they've had good enough seasons, and now you think Odell Beckham Jr. is going to come in and be the guy from 2016? You just went through this with a player in Cam Newton. Cam Newton is a former MVP. We all thought Cam Newton was going to step up and be the Patriots franchise quarterback, and it didn't happen. Guys do not revert back to when they were at their best, when they've already had a down period. That just does not happen in the NFL. It's rare and it's few and far between. You are what you are. There have been years where Cam Newton was not very good, so why would he be good with the Patriots? There have been years and years where Odell Beckham Jr. has not been very good, so why would he be good with the New England Patriots? It just doesn't make any sense. We love to play that game. Oh, if he comes to my team, he's gonna be that guy. I mean, the Patriots have had examples where they brought in Hall of Famers and it didn't work out. I think Chad Ochocinco is a future Hall of Famer. He came to the Patriots at a time in his career where we thought he would shine with them, and he didn't, because he wasn't that same guy. You're not getting these guys in their prime. You're getting them in a down period of their career. Odell Beckham Jr. is not the guy who makes one-handed touchdown catches. He's not that guy. And I think him going to the Rams is to signify he's not that guy, because the Rams did not bring Odell Beckham Jr. to be their number one target. Nobody wants Odell to be their number one guy. Listen, Aaron Rodgers did not want Odell Beckham Jr. to take over touches from Davante Adams. The Chiefs did not want Odell Beckham Jr. to take touches away from Tyreek Hill. The league is telling you how they feel about Odell, and still some of you look at him as that guy that he was with the Giants. He's not that guy. I also want to talk about this idea that people have been talking about. Well, this is the chance that Odell gets to pick who his quarterback is, because before Eli Manning was forced upon him. Well, guess what? Baker Mayfield was not forced upon Odell Beckham Jr. He wanted to be in Cleveland with his best buddy Jarvis Landry and supposedly his best buddy Baker Mayfield. Don't rewrite history and tell me Odell Beckham Jr. did not want to be a member of the Cleveland Browns, because all offseason when they got Odell, we were talking about, oh, the free amigos are going to dominate the NFL, and that didn't happen, and largely Odell Beckham Jr. is the reason why, because that Browns team is pretty good, and let's not act like Odell Beckham Jr. is leaving a bad situation in the Cleveland Browns. They were a playoff team last year. They won a playoff game without Odell Beckham. The Cleveland Browns did not let Odell Beckham Jr. go because of his bad attitude. Plenty of teams have kept a player because of their bad attitude before. I mean, let's listen, Randy Moss had an ego. Teams kept Randy Moss when he was still Randy Moss. People can get over your bad attitude. What they can't get over is your not so stellar play. If Odell Beckham Jr. was the same guy from 2016, the Cleveland Browns would do everything and anything to keep him on that football team, but he is not that same player anymore. And it feels like the league has reconciled with that. It doesn't feel like the NFL itself thinks of Odell as one of the best receivers. Again, he's not going to be the main target on the Rams. It's the media and the fans that still think of Odell Beckham Jr. as that guy making one-handed catches. Because the truth is, once you have a reputation as a great player, that reputation does not go away. I mean, again, Patriots fans, there are still some of them that think Cam Newton is still better than Mac Jones because they are thinking of the Cam Newton who was Superman, who was winning MVPs, and the same is happening with Odell Beckham Jr. They are thinking of the guy who made one-handed catches. They are thinking of the guy that was on the path to being the best receiver in NFL history when he is simply not that anymore. I want to talk about this move from the Rams' point of view because one of the reasons I felt like the Rams made this move is because the Rams have to make moves like this because they need to keep acquiring talent. I mean, they've mortgaged all their draft picks in their future for right now. They need to win a Super Bowl immediately, and they are doing everything and anything to make that possible. I mean, they traded for Von Miller. Now they have Odell Beckham Jr. That team is stacked, but they need to win the Super Bowl. They have a very small window to make that happen. So that's why every time there's a veteran available, I'm guessing the Rams are going to be involved. Again, they've done everything to acquire Matthew Stafford, Jalen Ramsey, and now they've got Von Miller. So yeah, they have to bring in a guy like Odell Beckham Jr. when that opportunity presents itself. But I do think it's a curious acquisition. I mean, they just did let go of Deshaun Jackson, who is not Odell, but does have a history of being a top receiver. Go because he wanted to play a bigger role on the team. So you don't need Deshaun Jackson, but you do need Odell. I mean, they already have Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, both in my opinion are excellent and underrated, and also they are now bringing in Odell, who at this point is vastly overrated. What you want Odell to be is a deep threat ball, a guy who can make the big play occasionally. You already had that in Deshaun Jackson. Yes, Deshaun Jackson is not the bigger name, but he is a better big-time playmaker at this point in his career than Odell Beckham Jr. Odell averages 14 yards a catch, while Deshaun Jackson, even at this point in his career, averages 17 yards a catch. Deshaun Jackson has better big play capability right now than Odell Beckham Jr., and I don't even think you can argue that. So it feels like even the Rams are more obsessed with Odell because he's a big name receiver. This is about the name Odell Beckham Jr. and not about what he's done lately. He is not one of the best receivers in the league. He's not even that capable of making the big plays. 7 total touchdowns in the last 2.5 years. Yes, you can say the injuries. Yes, you can say the quarterback play. But guess what? It hasn't happened for Odell, and he's part of the reason why it hasn't happened. It's not all about situation. He's not going to go to the Rams and then all of a sudden score 14 touchdowns to end the season. I guess if you were going to give one example of a wide receiver who left their team in controversy and then joined a new team and was pretty good taking a smaller role, it would be Antonio Brown with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But all of that was due to controversy with the Patriots. I mean, Antonio Brown did not have down seasons. In fact, when Antonio Brown is a main target, he can still put up some serious numbers. But more importantly, Antonio Brown has taken a lesser role with the Buccaneers. He has taken steps back from guys like Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. He is letting those guys shine again. He has taken that role. Is Odell Beckham Jr. seriously going to be happy if the Rams are winning games and on their way to the Super Bowl if he's averaging 2 catches a game? How is Odell Beckham Jr. going to feel? Is Odell Beckham Jr. signing with the Rams because he thinks he's going to put up huge numbers with Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay? Or is he trying to be part of a winner? And I don't know the answer to that question, but it is a fascinating element in all of this. Is he trying to remind us all he still is Odell Beckham Jr., or is he trying to to win a Super Bowl. And let's talk about his quarterback, Matthew Stafford. We all love Matthew Stafford. He's a machine. He puts up the stats. But is he a winner? I don't know. And listen, I get it. He is better than Baker Mayfield, but not by a whole lot. Let's not act like he is Aaron Rodgers. I think Odell should have gone to the Packers and played with a guy like Rodgers, because then you have a real chance of winning a Super Bowl. Yes, I think the Rams are legitimate contenders, but I have more faith in Aaron Rodgers winning a Super Bowl than I do in Matthew Stafford. I mean, the reason why Antonio Brown has taken a lesser role with the Buccaneers is because he's playing with Tom Brady, and that's the type of guy that Odell Beckham Jr. should be playing with right now. A guy like Aaron Rodgers. I know we don't like Rodgers right now, but he's still a way better quarterback than Matthew Stafford, and he's way more respected. He's a future Hall of Famer. And I'm saying all this not to say that Odell Beckham Jr. is not going to play well with the Rams, because he might play well with the Rams. I mean, we all think Sean McVay is some offensive genius, so maybe he is going to get the absolute best out of Odell Beckham Jr., and maybe Odell Beckham Jr. is about to win a Super Bowl. But this is what I am saying. During his time period with the LA Rams, he at no point is ever going to remind you of that Odell Beckham Jr. from 2016, because he is no longer the Odell Beckham Jr. from 2016. That is my entire point. For Odell Beckham Jr. to win a Super Bowl, he has to go to a place that is already stacked, because even when Odell Beckham Jr. was putting up monstrous numbers, he was never a winner. That's my problem with Odell Beckham Jr. is once the stats went away and he was on a good team in Cleveland, he was no longer happy. It feels like he is a guy who is at his happiest when he is putting up the monstrous numbers, when he is the face of the team. He was happy. Even when all these fans were imagining Odell Beckham Jr. on their team, he was putting up mass numbers. Remember, he was being compared to Randy Moss. Well, if he was Randy Moss, then he would put up monster numbers with the Patriots. I don't see Odell Beckham Jr. putting up monster numbers with the Rams. They have Cooper Kupp. They have Robert Woods, two better receivers than Odell Beckham Jr. Can Odell Beckham Jr. play a role on a Super Bowl winning team? Not a pivotal one, but a role. I have serious doubts. I think we as fans in the media and Odell Beckham Jr. himself have to look in the mirror and tell ourselves he is no longer the Odell Beckham Jr. we thought he was going to be. He was never that guy. He was never going to be the best receiver in NFL history. Again, all of his numbers came in those first 3 years. 35 of his 51 career touchdowns came in those first 3 years. All 3 of his 1,200-yard seasons came in those first 3 years. If we look at those first 3 years, he's an NFL Hall of Famer. He's the best receiver we've ever seen. But outside of that, he is just another guy. And with the Rams, I think he's going to remain just another guy. And I'd love to be proven wrong. I mean, Odell Beckham Jr. was the most exciting player in the NFL. He was the New York Giants. He was fun to watch. The one-handed catches. He was a unique, once-in-a-lifetime type of talent. But this whole podcast is to say that Odell Beckham Jr. has more in common with a guy like Dez Bryant, who was good with the Cowboys for a short period of time, than he does with Randy Moss, a guy who is a top 5 receiver of all time, a Hall of Famer, one of the very best to ever do it. Odell Beckham Jr. is not on his way to the Hall of Fame. I will look back at his period of dominance fondly, but let's not act like that period is still ongoing. The thing I think most people have wrong is Odell Beckham Jr. is not playing to reestablish himself as a top receiver in this league. He is playing for his future in this league. Where is his future if he's no longer that big-time playmaker, if he's no longer one of the best receivers in the league? Is there a place for a guy who is going to cause you some headaches from time to time? He is going to have to calm down his ego and become a role player if he wants to keep playing in the National Football League. He is playing for his future in the league, not his stature as a top wide receiver. That's what he's playing for. Does Odell Beckham Jr. stay in the league 5 years from now? I have serious doubts about his future in the NFL, and you should too. If he doesn't bounce back with the Rams, then who is he going to bounce back with? In closing, it's a storyline that I'm going to follow for the rest of the year. Is Odell Beckham Jr. going to play a role on this Rams team, and is he going to be happy in that role? And if he is happy and it does work out and they do win the Super Bowl, then he'll have a future in this league. I'm rooting for for Odell Beckham Jr., but he is not the guy who we all thought was going to be one of the best receivers of all time. He now has to become a role player. Everyone will be watching because, listen, Odell has put himself on the biggest stage. The Rams are going to make the postseason, and if Odell has impact in them, then he's going to get a somewhat sizable payday from a future NFL team. That's what this is about, his future as a player in this league, not to regain his stature as an all-time great. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please rate, review, and subscribe.